Is a 2x3 patch bigger than a 3x5 flag? If you listen to gun control propagandists and how they make their case, you might be fooled into thinking that this is so. However, they tend to leave so much out, like 99.7%. And here's what's missing. Now, when I bring up this 99.7% figure, those who bother to react to it tend to do so in disbelief. They tend to say it's inaccurate or it's some sort of an NRA statistic, which, when you come to think of it, is kind of a curious tactic to take. I mean, if you're trying to disprove your opponent's point, why would you bring up a gun rights organization that knows more about guns than you do? It really makes no sense. Some will even try to call me out on that number, which I really don't mind, especially if it will get them thinking about the issues much more than they usually do. And I'm ready to lay out the number for them, which is what I'm going to do for you right now. To arrive at this 99.7% figure, I first turn to the FBI UCRs, and I tally up the violent crimes that are gun-related, specifically murder, robbery, and aggravated assault. Tallying these up, the grand total for 2016 is 325,977. And then I look up additional numbers for suicides and injuries. And for that, I turn to the CDC, that organization that is supposedly forbidden from doing any sort of gun-related research whatsoever. And I look at their fatal injury records and look up gun-related suicides and gun-related unintentional deaths. Then I also look at their non-fatal injuries for, again, accidents, unintentionals, and suicide attempts. And the grand total I find for them, 43,694. And that brings up the grand total to 369,671. I throw in an extra few thousand to make it an even 375,000. Sounds like a pretty big number, right? I mean, that's bigger than a lot of American cities like Aurora or Orlando or Anchorage or Durham. Makes that 2x3 patch sound pretty big, doesn't it? But, as an aside, if you could somehow concentrate all of these gun-related misdeeds into a city the size of Orlando, that would still mean that the remainder of the country would be relatively unharmed by gun violence. And that would mean that 322.6 million Americans were not affected by gun violence. That's about 99.88% of the population that's not affected by gun violence. But getting back on track, in order to get a percentage, you have to take this 375,000 and put it into an estimate of the gun-owning population. Now, this number is a little harder to tack down because we don't keep an active registry of legal gun owners in this country, and rightfully so. However, we start getting into numbers that gun prohibitionists generally don't like to talk about, and we start getting into math that gun prohibitionists don't like to discuss a whole lot. Because the number of gun owners in this country does not number in the hundreds of thousands, but rather in the millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions. However, I have heard estimates of this number ranging as low as 80 million and as high as 180 million. So I prefer to take a middle of the road number, 120 million. So you take that 375,000, put it into the 120 million, and you come up with a ratio of 0.003125. Multiply that by 100 to get it to express a percentage figure, and you come up with 0.3% rounded down. Now, bear in mind, I'm being very loose and liberal about what constitutes a gun owner, because the bulk of that 375,000 or that 0.3% are mostly criminals, juvenile criminals and adult felons, which I don't consider to be rightful gun owners. However, a picture should be forming right now showing that it's a very tiny minority that abuse the Second Amendment. And so we arrive at the final figure by taking that 0.3% and subtracting it from 100% to get 99.7%. Voila. Even though the numbers should be pretty much clear, not everybody processes numbers quite the same way. It doesn't have quite the same impact. So I'm going to present to you a little visual aid to help drive the point home. Now imagine, if you will, that all the gun owners in this country are represented by a 3-foot by 5-foot flag. Proportionally speaking, all those who misuse guns and abuse their Second Amendment rights would take up a space on this flag amounting to no more than a 2-inch by 3-inch patch. However, the way that gun control propagandists represent or misrepresent the issue is they look at that 2-inch by 3-inch patch, put it in front of your face constantly, and try to make it look like this is the total of gun culture, when actually this is a better representation of what real gun culture is about.